another Aligner Insider podcast. Well, hello, everybody in podcast land. This is another Aligner Insider podcast. I am Dean Steinman from Ortho Marketing, and to my left today is this super handsome, mega smart orthodontist of the stars, Dr. Barry Glaser.
Oh, me.
How are you, Barry?
Guy behind me.
How are you today?
Doing well. I'm glad that we didn't get an ice storm. Today is Tuesday, February 16th, 2020. Our friends down in Texas got hammered today, but up in New York, it's mostly just rain. So kind of grateful that we're not slip sliding away, Dean.
Yep, exactly. So it's I'm expecting another storm coming in. So go figure. February. I'm just so sick of this already. But with that said, middle of February, and we have a very special guest with us today. Back for one of our favorite guests to join us is Chris Bentson. Chris Bentson is a partner in Benson Koppel and Associates. Chris is a guru in the orthodontic community. Knows everything there is to know about the industry, and we're very excited to have him. So, Chris, welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. Great to be here. Sorry, I kind of got my COVID look on today, but I got to clean up to go see a client tomorrow. So,
no worries. All of us, I think, go to the shave twice a week now.
Right.
So, Chris, we're going to kind of jump right in. So, obviously, you've been with us several times before, and we always talk about trends and what have you. So now that we're in, calendar change, and we're in February of 2021, and we're coming across almost a year of since the shutdown and COVID. What have you seen as far as over the last several months and the trends that practices and the industry are going with? Overall, we could get into specifics, but just what trends are you seeing that are now taking full effect and are making a difference in practices?
Yeah, Dean and Barry. By the way, great to be with you guys. Happy New Year. Or as we start into this New Year, it's still odd, isn't it? And we'll get back to normal sometime and face to face. But as you look at COVID, the big takeaway for me, as I've studied it in the specialty and in business, is really stolen from a marketing professor at Stern NYU School of Business, Scott Galloway, who I'm a huge fan of. But he really has a book called Post COVID, and he talks about what are the most enduring effects of the pandemic, and is number one was as an accelerant. And I think that's what I'd like to talk about with regards to orthodontics. Accelerating what? We've talked about the adoption curve has been shortened in virtual everything. The adoption curve for aligners has been abbreviated. And, there's a line in the book that he talks about what used to take decades is now taking weeks. You think about what we're doing right now, and the podcast has been around for a while, but you just think about where we live now. We live on these Zoom podcasts, these, different platforms for online education. Our residents live on that. We had Whiteboard before, we had Skype before, we had something, a very slow adoption, and now everybody's running their life and their world from that. We talk about, would doctors, would team members, would patients accept virtual? Where did we all go when the pandemic shut down? We went to virtual. And now that we're open back up, a mistake that practice owners are making, in my opinion, is walking away from virtual. It needs to be part of your arsenal going forward. The patients are comfortable with it. Your team members can be deployed differently. They don't want to be in the office when their kids aren't in the office, and we've got all kinds of issues there. And the doctor's adoption has been better. So that's happening. When we look at, how did we as clinicians bounce back out of COVID? We did it on the backs of aligners. The data is very, very clear that aligner therapy had great advantages to the aligner-centric practices in COVID, and they had even greater advantages bouncing out because we could do some virtual. We had less pressure on seats and chairs in our offices. And so we were at 24 years to get to 1 out of 4 cases being done with aligners. I suggest in my lectures now that within the next decade, we're going to be well over half the cases in the country doing with aligners. When you look at some of the decisions the bracket companies have made during COVID, You see Dentsply getting out of the bracket band business. You see Rocky Mountain being sold to and really making a bet on South America. You look at Ormco and what's all the news coming out of Ormco's on Spark. Then you look at Dentsply again, just bought Byte, a direct to consumer company. So the world is accelerating towards digital. And even on the bracket side, we've got some really promising companies up your way. Lightforce with Alfred Griffin III is going to be a great business that's growing like crazy. KLO and Braces is going to be a great company that's a digital company going forward. In my state of North Carolina, we've got Christine Jackson, Bone Break, who's doing some unbelievable research on metal printed brackets. Can you imagine the day you could actually digitally print a metal bracket in your office? I think that day is not today, but it's in the future and it's possible. So some real acceleration in the digital world, and we're going to have to change our practices to manage through that. Long answer. Sorry, guys. That was
What
a
advice?
long.
No, that's cool. Um, so now I'm gonna. You're talking to an orthodontist, and you're over coffee or in his office, and how do you walk them through the ability to adapt like this? Because adapting is not something that people take to heart or do very easily. And Barry and I have talked about this many times. That and according to the great Billy Bean, adapt or die. And so, how do you walk somebody through that process and get through their skull that you have to do this, okay? And then once they do it, what steps do they understand have to be done in order to it? Because as you said, it's accelerant. So if you don't accelerate your technologies, accelerate your practice to um, these new technologies and platforms, you're going to be left behind. Plain and simple. So what advice can you give somebody to do that? Because obviously you don't want them. You can't take it all in at once. So in increments or baby steps, what's the first thing that somebody should look at to do as far as adapting?
I tell you, I think there's 3 or 4 things that in 2021 practitioners really must do. You got to look at managing your cash flow, what happened to your production in 2021. So I think you got to increase your paid in fulls. I think you have to look at redeploying your team members over time. I think we're going to see these I call them PAs for orthodontics. We're going to have many orthodontists doing a lot of digital ClinCheck type work. To prepare the orthodontist to spend less time in that digital ClinCheck world. And we're going to want to deploy some of our staff virtually so they can work at home. We still can't get full employment of our staff members. They're either not comfortable or they got kids at home. How can we use them to help the practice grow? We have some time to work this, and then you're going to have to work on taxes a little bit. I think for 22, 23, 24, it's going to be okay in 21. So how do you do all that stuff? It was never more clear to me during the pandemic that the practices that did better than those that didn't were practices that engaged with consultants. We found, and what did we do in the pandemic? We flocked to where there was information, collective information. For some of us that was on the Facebook groups, I would say that the Facebook groups aren't the best way. It's not as intimate, it's not as close, but practices for decades before the pandemic that used a consultant versus those they didn't outperform their peers. We found that during the pandemic, there was groupthink with the consultant practices. They could share ideas among the people that were in the group, and they could make decisions. And there was a lot of confidence and better performance coming out of that. So we know that only 20% of orthodontists in the United States ever engaged with a consultant. Why? Because we're just too bloody smart for our own good. We've got to get some help, and we have to have a sensei, a Sherpa, somebody to hold hands with to take us up the mountain. And these tasks before us are not easy to accomplish. Change is hard. And so you need a consultant. Maybe that's you, Dean, and you and Barry's group for your subset of people, or it's Karen Moad, or it's Mary Beth Kirkpatrick, or it's, an FE group, with orthopreneurs or something. But you have to be part of a group, in my opinion, to have the ability, especially if you're a solo practice, to have the confidence to make these decisions to change, because we're just wired not to make them as human beings. And I think that's my number one answer is, my best suggestion is, get a consultant that can help you through this. They see, concepts that work over and over and over. And people say, well, they're $5,000 a day. Some are less expensive, some are more. And, that's just a lot of money. The return on that investment is by far the best thing you can do in your practice. I'm in no consultant's back pocket. There's no money flowing back to me for saying this. But that's what I would do if I was advising an orthodontist is, find a group that you connect with and make decisions with them. You'll make better decisions. You'll make them faster. They'll guide you through it.
I agree. As a consultant myself in in marketing, the return on investment is
That's
astronomical
great.
if when done correctly.
Yeah.
Typically we're seeing 3, 4, 5, 6, 800% return as a minimum. Can you imagine if if your financial guy said to you, "Okay, give me $100,000, I'm giving you 8x from it," all day long. Well, that's what marketing does, but you have to listen to the expert. And it's funny. I was talking to a client the other day, and we're giving him advice, and he's like, "Dean, whatever you say you do, we'll do it. My accountant says to do this, we do it. My lawyer says to do it, we do it. Our consultant says to do it, we do it because you're the expert." And it's great when people understand the value and what's coming because you know what you know. Okay, you don't know what you don't know. And by working with experts and being able to brainstorm with other people who are successful, especially in study groups or Facebook groups or little pods, it's a no-brainer. You have to do that, and it's great that you understand and you look at things at a different level than I do. Obviously, you're looking at the whole forest. I'm just looking at the trees, but at the same time, we have to make sure that it all works together. So that's really great insight there. If you can, walk me through the paid in full model there, because what's the obviously incentive for a patient to pay in full? So they maybe a little discount, or like for example, Dr. Glaser, what percentage of people pay in full when they come to a practice? Do people have $6,000 to lay out right away, or do most people work over payments? So obviously, from a business standpoint, it's great to get the money up front. When clients say to me, "Dean, I'll pay the year of the marketing up front," I'm like, "Great, I'll take the money now." But at the same time, the cash flow is important moving forward as well. So, what's the benefit, obviously, besides cash flow, of paying in full, and what's the best way to get it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Chris, I'll let you
Chime in
take that.
first. Yeah.
Chris, I'll let you take that one first, and I'll
Yeah.
give you my take on it.
This is something we've done a lot of studying on. And if you look what happened to practices on average during the pandemic, we were really coming out of 2020 with a strong 2019. In January and February and the first half of March were really good. Okay. And then the world stopped spinning, at least in the same direction, right? And in a sense, it stopped spinning orthodontically production wise, because what we saw, if you look at the data, is in March, the average orthodontic practice was down just under 50% in production. But in April, we didn't see anybody. We saw a few virtual starts, but we were down 97% as a group in production. Okay. So you take those 6 weeks, 2 weeks in March and 4 weeks in April, we're down 50% and 100% almost, 97%. Then we start opening up for some practices, not up your way, Barry, but you were closed longer. But for some practices, then in May, we're down 31%. And then what we heard about was this really phenomenal kind of reopening, which we were so blessed and happy to see. So practices had this great
It
6 month
was such
run
a bump.
after
Yeah.
we reopened, and we finished down 7% in collections on average. Okay. But our production numbers were down bigger than that. And so we know that in orthodontics, typically we collect next year what we produced this year, right? So even if we're operating now at kind of pre-COVID levels, our cash flow, because of those production month hits, is our contract receivable balances are smaller. Our cash flow month to month is lower. It's not huge, but it's you feel like you have less money because you do, and we'll crawl out of it. But when you really look at the
Right.
tail of the comet, how long does it take to crawl out of it? It takes for most practices until October of 2022 before your cash flow is back to pre-COVID levels.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you feel like, what can you do as a practice owner to feel like you can get cash earlier? You can increase your paid in fulls. To answer your question, average practice has between 10 and 20% of their patients who start every year pay in full. Okay. Just a certain amount of people like to do that. They
Yep,
get
that's
their
exactly what
card
we have.
points. Is that about where you are, Barry? something like that.
That's exactly where we are. Let me ask you something. Is there like a sweet spot for the what the a reasonable amount of a discount is?
Well, that's where I was headed, and that's the right question, because the only way you can increase paid in fulls is to increase the discount. That's the only dial that you have as a practice owner to make more people accept it, other than presenting it more frequently. Okay, well, there's some psychology around that we don't have time to get into, but most people are at 3% right now. 20 years ago, we were at 10% because interest rates were different and things like that. So to get someone's attention, you're going to have to raise it to 5-6%. That will it double it? I don't know, and I don't want you to double it, and I don't want you to start everybody with paid in fulls. But there's a couple of tools. One is, what is your discount? Two, if you're a liner customer, I promise you this product has changed. And look at the tool that they've given you with Lending Point. It's a great product. I've been working with them a lot on it over the last during COVID, and I think it's a fabulous tool. Barry and I have talked about it over the last year or so. People underutilizing that tool for aligners because it pays your lab bill and it pays you up front. And I think I would try to present that as an option to every aligned patient and try to start 10 to 20% of my aligner cases with that. Handles the lab bill problem, increases your cash flow. I want you to increase your paid in fulls. That's the message. Because if you just do it by 5 or 10% from where it is now, wherever it is, you'll feel like you have as much cash as you did pre-COVID. And then we can kind of wean ourselves off of that if we want to, or learn to live a bit differently. But we want some cash right now to take some fear out of the market in our practices. And if we happen to have a slowdown, we may. I don't know. It's nice to have that in our arsenal. So increase your paid in fulls. That's a takeaway.
Now, guys, people who are listening out there, here's a little question for you, a little quiz. All right. What is the number one way to get a paid in full patient?
Uh,
I know the answer.
present it. Ask for the order.
Ask.
Ask, ask, and don't be afraid to ask. Okay, it's that simple. You have to ask. The same thing when it comes to marketing. How do you get a review? You ask. How do you get a referral? You ask. How do you get it paid in full? You ask. So, is this part of your TC program? Is this part of your sales process? Is to offer this? You can't be afraid to ask in these days. Worst case scenario, somebody says no,
Yeah.
but if you don't ask, you don't get.
You know, we're
So,
finding, Dean, something very interesting. So I've offered paid in full discount for the longest time, and we kind of settled a long time ago on 7%. And the reason that we did 7% was back in the day, Chris, when we used Orthodontist fee plan. You remember them?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a company, and they basically, when the patient signed up for OFP, we would get our money left 7%. So, and I always thought that was good. So I figured, well, I'll just offer the same discount. But interesting, so on a $7,000 fee, we're talking about what, like $450, something like that. But it's interesting because if you I think I find a better acceptance when we give the patients a dollar amount versus a percentage. Like when we say, well, we'll take 7% off. I don't know. It doesn't echo as much as if we say we'll take 450 off or we'll take 500 off or something like that. I don't know why, but that money imagery seems to be a better way. So that would be my suggestion, to have your TC have a specific dollar amount, whether let's say it's a full case or a partial case, with that you sort of empower your TC to have, and just say to somebody, look, if you pay in full, we'll give you $400 off, or whatever the number is. It just seems to be, it sounds better to patients that way than when you give them percentage.
Yeah, I think Barry, you just nailed a couple of things. One is to our previous conversation about consultants. I'm not one. This is a strategy that I think is a great idea, but in true implementation, why doesn't it work? Because people try my idea of just raising the percent instead of raising the number, because you're been around and act like a consultant. This is the power of experience and going with a group that's got a lot of experience. So, touche. I totally agree with your statement.
And the other thing too, by the way, for folks thinking about maybe increasing their discount, I think you have to make the conscious decision whether you're going to allow, let's say, people to pay with a credit card or not, because obviously then, talking about another 3% on top of that. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say, look, we're going to give you a $500 discount on a $7,000 fee, but we're not. You have to write us you pay us cash or check. We're not
right,
doing that with a credit card, and I don't think that's unreasonable, because at some point you can't give it all away, and I think that
sure.
you're piling the one discount on top of the other, and before you know it, it can affect profitability too. So I think they have to think that through beforehand, because that's what patients are going to say. they're going to say, oh, well, I want to get, points on my credit card. And then I think you have to think about how to answer that.
Right.
Yeah, and just to be
Um,
clear on the paid in full points, if you're at 10%, I'd like you to go to 15 or 16. If you're at 20%, maybe just three or four more because that's already pretty high. If you're at 5%, go to 15%. You'll feel a real difference in your cash flow, and then you can wean yourself off. So I'm not suggesting that 85, but it takes a lot of asks to get enough yeses to influence your cash flow.
This podcast is brought to you by Ortho Marketing. Ortho Marketing is a full-service digital marketing agency exclusively for dentists and orthodontists, providing website design, social media management, search engine optimization, and digital advertising. For more information, visit orthomarketing.com.
so a segment right into cash flow. So now we're at the point where it's almost probably been 6 months or so that practices have gotten their initial money from the government. They got those PPPs. What has been the scuttlebutt as far as the initial payment back of that? You hear things that the government's going to let it go if under a certain amount of money or what have you. What have you found on that? Because obviously I needed it. Some practices do, some practices didn't. Majority of them did. So let's talk initially. What should people do about the first round? Do you just set it and forget it? Do you keep it it's a lot of money to start paying back? And secondly, let's talk about the next round. What should be done from that?
Yeah, I think this is a relevant and salient topic, and I acted much like an orthodontic practice. I'm about the same size as a large orthodontic practice. I have fewer employees. I have 10 employees, and we went through the whole process that you guys did as practice owners. We took the first round; it was forgiven, and we're going to take the second round, hold it back, see if we need it, and we'll either send it back or we'll use it. I think it's one of the few government programs that's worked. It worked really well for orthodontists. Pretty much everybody was affected with their team members, and we furloughed people for the first time in my lifetime for sure. And it picked up that, and they decided to make the rules a lot easier at the end. And so pretty much in the orthodontic arena, about 100% of what we got the first round, and it was a very high percentage of orthodontists that took it. I want to say 80%, but I'm not exactly sure on that. But almost all of that was forgiven. Almost 100% of that was forgiven. And so now you have until the end of March to go for a second round. The Small Business SBA is much more greased and process-wise. Your banks are too. Go with the same bank. You can get a similar amount. You have to qualify, and the biggest qualifying number is you have to be down at least 25% in one quarter since last March. Most of you were, specifically in that second or third quarter. And then most of you bounce really strongly back. So you'll have to kind of see how your numbers look. But if you qualify, the word that I'm seeing from, Kane Waters McGill is if you qualify, go get it. And, it's probably going to be forgiven too. We don't know exactly how that's going to work out. I'd put it in a rainy day account and see if you need it.
Smart. Great. So that's great. Now, if somebody was to wants to go for round two, how do they even go about doing that? What's the steps involved? Because they probably did it initially because everybody was scrambling, so they probably used some third party or whatever to use it. So should they go back to the initial person? Should they just go to the SBA.org, whatever it is, website
Yeah,
to do it?
there's a lot of material out there. You can start with going to the AAL website. There is a ton of resource material on this there, and they're keeping up with that a lot. So I would go to the AAL website, Kane Waters website, McGill Hill's website. Both have great information on it. Probably some of the other orthodontic consultants do as well. Or go to the bank where you got your loan. Because they'll have the forms that you're going to fill out with them. And I'd probably use the same bank or process if I could. So it's much easier this time around than it was the first time. I just saw our completed form
Great.
yesterday.
Okay, so yep, I did it last week as well.
Yeah.
So mine's in it as well. Right, put it for a rainy day. You never could tell if the government is being nice for the first time and offering it. Take it.
Yeah.
Don't look a gift government in the mouth, especially if the teeth aren't straight. Um, so, Chris, I'm going to ask you. I did this before to put on your special look in the future glasses. Okay, so what's going to happen in the next 6 months in this industry?
Yeah. I think we're going to be a little bit softer than the previous six in the next 6 months, just in patient flow. And not for any specific reason other than we had this big pent-up demand. We had this bounce back. We're eating through that a little bit. It's not linear where everybody that didn't start in March, April, and May did start the last half of the year, but there's fewer and fewer of those people, although business is still strong, but it's in spots, it's softer. So that's why I think that paid in full is important. Let's get our cash flow up. And then I think the digital modes are going to resonate more with the patients. I think patients are going to like fewer visits. They're going to like more virtual opportunities with your office. They're going to like to be in your office less than they were pre-pandemic, and you need to prepare your practice for that. I also think we're going to see a surge in OSOs, and orthodontists are going to get real nervous about that. An OSO is let's define that as corporate dentistry that's orthodontic centric. But those companies did really well because there's doctors primarily in the last quarter of their active career that are saying, I just don't know if I want to work to make the phone ring and do the things that I'm going to have to do to change, like we're talking about. And maybe a corporation I'll sell to, take the equity off the table, and I'll work for them for 5 more years or 10 more years, but I won't have to worry about it. And people are making those decisions at a more accelerated rate. Is solo practitioners and small group ownership going away? Absolutely not. If my child wanted to be an orthodontist, I'd say go for it. It's one of the greatest professions with the greatest amount of financial freedom that you can get. Just pick your spots, be a little bit sharper with your pencil, get a consultant, you'll be just fine. And we're going to have a digital practice. That's how you got to run things today. So smaller footprints probably, but I think a little bit slower to answer your question. And then, hopefully, we're going to get to where we can travel and move around much more securely and safely like we used to before March of last year, but we're some distance away from that. I know I'm on the steering committee for the AEO 20 January, winter meeting, and we're thinking that might be the first really true face-to-face, AEO meeting in 2 years. Hopefully, we don't know, but it's going to be a while. I think Boston at the
Yeah.
AEO is going to be, half virtual, half face-to-face. We'll have fewer attendance, but virtual is going to happen. Online education is going to change the way we teach people. I mean, there's a lot of long-term effects of this thing that we're going to go, but I think the takeaway from this message is watch your cash flow, keep doing the things that you need to do, take care of your team members, get educated more on aligners. Barry's a resource, and you guys are for that. And you've got to market direct to the consumer like the SDC companies are, because that's where the growth is. And you got to do adults.
Dean, I think we lost your audio there, Dean.
Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, there you go. Now we can hear you.
Yep. I was just wanted to chime in there. Chris says, offer more adults, and that's what Dr. Glaser did for me. And I'm on a line at train number 12.
Let's see,
And
smile. Let's see.
there you go.
Oh, wow, now I'm starting to see those front teeth a little bit.
And it's amazing,
Right.
when I see the video on my dental monitoring app, it's mind blowing how much my teeth have moved in 3 months. It's incredible.
Yeah, I do. Let me just make the comment too before we wrap everything up. Chris, I don't know if you've seen this, but I have had an explosion of adult patients, and I like in the old days, we used to send send a fruit basket to your good referring dentist and stuff. I feel like I should send a fruit basket to Zoom, because I cannot tell you how many patients have said to me, I'm doing all these Zoom meetings and I hate my teeth. So I think, a lousy webcam and Zoom has actually, I would say probably in the last 6 months, 50% of our new patient starts are adults. And that's way above what we used to see. So we've kind of tried to hone in on that and focus in on trying to attract those patients, because they're looking at their teeth and they're not liking what they're seeing. So I do think for doctors, the kind of marketing campaign, like, you're wearing a mask, it's a great time to get your teeth done, that kind of stuff is something to consider as well. I don't know if you've seen that, over the practices that you work with too.
Yeah, we absolutely have. And I think, I've heard the term Zoom effect thrown around at different orthodontic meetings. And it certainly is true that there is a Zoom effect that's a positive for orthodontics. And yeah, you need a market. Dean, I'm sure you've got lots of stories of how you can touch that particular cohort. But we're going to grow. We're going to continue to grow on the backs of adults. We have for the last 10 years. I don't want to be a wet blanket too much, but we're having fewer and fewer births, and we have for a long, long time. There's going to be fewer children to treat in the generations ahead than we've had in the past, and more people trying to grab at them. So what is that marketplace that's there? It's, the adult marketplace, and practices are also making, some real innovative turns on this notion that orthodontics is orthodontics for life. You're a patient for life. Gravity sucks, and it's going to change. The way your smile looks when you leave my office at 13. But feel free to come back when you're 24 or 44 or 64. I'm here for you. And so I think this more long-term patient marketing is going to be something we'll see a lot more of as well.
Great. Okay, Chris, 2 last questions for you, my man. Number one is, since we're in the smile business, what makes Chris Bentson smile?
I will have to say, oddly enough, that COVID was for my life, place in life, a mixed blessing. It was sad to see some of the pain that people went through, but it was a forced sabbatical for me. I got to spend, I was on 3 planes between March and December, and I usually am on, 3 a week. And so it forced me to, kind of get home. I thought that if I wasn't out there, my business would not succeed, and I found that was an arrogant and misplaced notion and position. I have great people around me, so it was a time of a lot of personal growth and a pleasant time for me and my wife and my kids and my friends, and I'm fortunate that way. So that it makes me smile that we're hopefully getting through this. But I learned that lesson. I'm 59, and so I don't have that much time left. But it was a great lesson to learn. I'm anxious to get back out there with all you guys. But it was a nice break for me.
You got plenty of time. You and I are the same age, Chris. Plenty of time.
That's right.
What are you talking
about? All right, and we have one last question for you, which is our favorite question to ask. Do you want to hit him, Barry, with
no, Dean, okay. You're the man.
All right. So, Chris, gun to your head. Hershey bar, Reese's peanut butter cup.
Chocolate and peanut butter, and there's no doubt. Yeah, it's magic together. Good magic together.
There you go. We're like at a 99% clip for this. It's funny. So we are not KOLs for Reese's, just so you know. Excellent. All right, Chris. Well, thanks so much. So once again, if somebody has any questions, wants to learn more about you, get in touch with you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, go to our website, 800 number, you can put a request for information. We talk to a lot of people. We don't charge initially for anything. We're an educational company as much as a change of ownership company. So we can help you. Let us have an idea. And that chocolate and peanut butter is pedo and ortho. That goes a lot together. So call me about that.
There you go. Excellent. Great. All right. Chris Bentson, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate everybody out there. Be safe. Keep smiling, and have a Reese's on us today. Okay.
Appreciate
Thanks,
you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.